What's up guys, and welcome back to Tech Plant. Today I'm going to show you how to make some wild grape jelly. Let's check it out. Alright, so I was outside around my house and there are these really large bushes with like berries on them, and one day my neighbor told me they were wild grapes, so I ate a bunch of them and I did not die. So I did some research, found out that they are indeed wild grapes, and I looked up what you can do with them. And I found out a lot of people like to make wild grape jelly. Now, before you go and do this, make sure you look up how to identify these things properly, because there are some lookalikes. As it was, these were actually growing in a tree with not grapes. These are poisonous berries of some kind, so you definitely better know what you're picking, because I don't want you guys to try and make some jelly at home that is just like poison jelly. So definitely got to be careful when you're harvesting anything from the outside. Lucky for me though that these things were really abundant. There was a ton of wild grapes, which is what you need if you're going to make jelly, or at least a decent amount to make the efforts worth it and so you can share. So I was able to collect and harvest a lot of them. So all it takes to actually harvest these is literally just cutting the little vines off. Just again, make sure you're really knowing what you're cutting and adding to your pile, because these grow amongst a lot of other things that produce very similar looking berries. I want to say there's one called like a moon seed berry, and those can grow right alongside in the same spot and even like intertwine with each other. So really pay attention to what you're cutting, because I don't want anyone to get sick or die because they grabbed the wrong stuff. So you really have to pay attention. Also, make sure you collect a lot, because these are mostly seeds inside. There's not a lot of pulp, not a lot of juice per grape, so you're going to need a lot if you want a good portion of jelly. Obviously, you can do this with just a few little bits and you'll just get maybe 1 or 2 jars, but I wanted quite a few jars because I wanted to share with some friends and families, so I collected a ton of them. Now, these are going to be filled with all kinds of creatures, little bugs, little worms, all kinds of things I actually found in here. So try and rinse them the best you can before you start plucking them apart, and pay attention. I found what looked like almost like fungus gnat larvae, caterpillars, jumping spiders, and everything in between. I then prepared the area to actually separate all these grapes from the vines. Now, there is a lot of different ways to make grape jelly. I chose a little bit of a different method. A lot of people just heat up the grapes like in a strainer on the oven or in a pot, and they kind of mush it up there, but I didn't want to do that. I wanted to sort of separate the juice and pulp first and then cook that up for more of like a, not a pure way to do it, but I just tried something different. So definitely read a few articles and kind of find the recipe and the processing style that you want to follow, because it's going to differ a little bit. But again, make sure you prep your area correctly. This stuff can dye things. Actually, it washed out pretty well on certain things, but again, it's still messy, so I laid down a plastic bag and I put on some gloves as well, because these also are known to have that little crystal in there. I think it's sort of similar to some tropical plants that can become like sort of irritating to your skin and even your stomach. So maybe eat some prior to making jelly to see if you can handle the crystals and stuff, so you're not like spending all this time, because it took me about 8 hours to make the jelly from start to finish, so it's a lot of work if it's something that like upsets your stomach. So definitely sample a few and make sure you don't have any weird reactions to it. This is probably, well, honestly, it only took about half the time. The rest of the time was actually like preparing it and stuff, but separating the grapes from the stem takes a long time. You're going to want to pull the grapes off kind of nicely. These are a little more fragile than regular grapes and they can pull apart. So sort of twisting and pulling, and try and grab at the base, and make sure you're not grabbing any dried up gross ones, moldy ones, and try and avoid the really tart, unripe green ones. This seriously took a very long time. I think it started at like 8 p.m. and it was easily like, I want to say almost 11 o'clock by the time I finished this, maybe a little less than that. It takes a long time to pull these all apart and get them all set up. So definitely set out a lot of time, at least 4 hours just to get the processing done for sure. And you can always store the juice and pulp in the fridge and continue the next day. But again, definitely don't start this if you only have like an hour or so to do it, because it does take time. Because these are a little fragile, I did do it in increments where I would rinse out the berries that have built up, or the grapes that have built up, and sort of rinse off any of the filth. A lot of like little immature like grape starts, I don't know how to really refer to them, but they're like basically a stem with a tiny little bulb on it, not even green or even fruity yet, just like almost like woody, would fall in a lot. So I like to rinse them in smaller batches, because it's a lot easier than doing one big batch, because then you kind of squish things a little too much as you try and rinse them. You can already see like how vivid the juice is. Like the little bits that leaked out really dyed that water. I was really impressed actually, and a little worried at first, thinking I lost a lot of juice, but don't worry about that. It's just really like potent, that's all. I also thought the color was really beautiful, so I wanted to try dyeing some clothing. It did not work. I don't have footage of it not working either, but it just turned brown. It did not keep a nice, like, beautiful look. It actually slowly fades to a darker purple color, then it gets to more of a blue-gray, then finally it kind of goes like gray, and then when it fully dries, completely brown. So don't waste your time doing this, but I like to try weird things, but it failed. So a lot of people will ask what the results are. They're not even worth showing you. Just turn the shirt like brown and disgusting. But anyways, by the time you get everything all strained and cleaned up, you should have a pretty big bowl of grapes. I was surprised by how many I managed to get, but also surprised by how little I actually got. It seems like a good amount. I don't have any like actual solid measurements here, but it's a pretty big bowl, and I think I ended up getting almost 8 cups of juice, which is a lot actually. I mean, you can make a lot of jars with that, and you'll see that as we continue forward. So this next part is where I sort of differed in how I did things. I don't have a great way to separate the seeds, and I also didn't want to like cook all the seeds because I want to keep the seeds, and that was like a bigger decision for me because I wanted to collect as many seeds as I possibly could because maybe I'm going to give them away or something. I don't know. But anyways, what you're going to need is some sort of colander that has some semi-big holes so you can push the pulp through, but not the seeds. Again, the big issue with this is there's so many seeds in these little grapes and very little like grapefruit. So basically I'm just mushing it up against the side of the colanders. I did also have like a more finer strainer on the other, like beneath the colander for any other bigger stuff that makes it through, just so I can sort of like see what's coming through and not that seeds are escaping into my juice. So kind of like a double strainer setup, and really you're just going to manually squeeze and mush, squeeze and mush. I did this so much. I did so much squishing and pushing and whatever, and you can sort of see the results here. There's a fine juice in the bowl, and then there's more of like a pulpy, foamy stuff caught in the strainer, and there I sort of looked for seeds. And then once I determined there really wasn't seeds getting through the colander, then I just added that to the overall juice. One thing I loved about this process was the color. Like, this juice is so beautiful in my opinion. When you see it on the paper towels, on any surface, on the gloves, it is so deep and so vibrant. I don't know if it's coming across well in the video, but in real life it was absolutely beautiful. Like, I really enjoyed the color. It's very rare that you can see such a vibrant, deep, beautiful color, and these really produced it. It was just actually really fun to squeeze. It was cool. So once you're done straining everything, you should have a big bucket of juice basically with some pulp, and I had a lot of foam from just squeezing the ever-loving life out of these things. So I had this like weird foam stuff, but I just included it in there because I was hoping it was sort of pulpy. And again, I'm trying to get everything I can to hopefully give it some of that like natural pectin, but you'll see later that it ends up failing. This next part I'm going to sort of fast forward through because I'm going to do this again in like 30 seconds here, but just I want to show you my failures. So basically all jelly is a lot of sugar and a lot of juice, and you sort of boil it down and jar it up. And so with canning, you're going to need some supplies if you want to make this last. Otherwise, you can make jelly that can be just consumed right away, and you just refrigerate it. So what you do is you boil it down as good as you can and get it boiling and everything. I think it needs to hit like 120 degrees. At a certain point, you can tell it's starting to gel. I really didn't see that. I don't know what I'm doing, quite honestly. I'm just following recipes. Never done this before. Anyways, sanitize the jars. You get your big canner. Once you get it boiled, you dump it in the cans. You'll put the lids on there that you boiled. You got to boil the lids, boil the jars, fill them up, seal it, and boil it all. And then you leave it sit and it should gel up. However, I didn't use pectin. I was hoping the wild grapes have enough, and I totally failed the first batch. And so now we can actually go through more detail on how to actually do this. So the next day I poured my jars back into the bucket to start again. Luckily you can just reboil this stuff. It's not like I've wasted it or ruined it. So I did end up trying again, and then I actually filmed the second half of the juice batch. So that's where we'll kind of start now. Alright, now that you saw my failures, I did go out and pick up some pectin, and luckily I did have a second batch of fresh juice. I did remake the old juice and it turned out fine, so this is just, I filmed the second batch once I like did it, so that way you can see it. So anyways, all the recipes I can find, it's basically 1 cup juice, 1 cup sugar. I did use a little extra sugar in hopes that it helped like make it more jelly-like, because I've been struggling getting that real thick consistency. But anyways, you just measure those out into either a saucepan or something that you can basically boil it in. I just have I don't know what you even call this, just like a deep pot. And so I just mixed the two in there. Then once I got that stuff mixed up pretty good and the sugar pretty much dissolved, it takes a little time for it to actually get up to the boiling point, especially because it came out of the fridge cold, because again I saved this from the day prior. And during that time you can use you'll need a canning like pot. I don't know what they really call this. My aunt gave me a bunch of canning stuff years ago, and I've just kept it, and I finally get to use it. But you're going to want to pre-sanitize your jars. I don't think you have to do this if you end up boiling your jars for more than 10 minutes, which you end up doing with jelly, but I'm going to do it anyways because I don't want contaminants. So I'm going to pre-boil all my jars to sanitize them while I'm waiting for my juice to boil up. Now that my juice is getting closer to actually boiling, I'm going to add that pectin to it and then the magic calcium juice or whatever. It's like I said, it's a weird one that doesn't depend on sugar. The other ones actually depend on sugar content to gel up, but this one you use like some calcium water or something. I don't know. I'm not a big fan of it. Didn't realize it, but that's all the place had that I bought it from, so whatever. And if you like overboil it, it doesn't work, which is something I think I screwed up on. But anyways, I whisked it in really good and sort of brought it to a boil. While it was coming to that boil though, I did take out all the sanitized jars. They had been boiling for about 10 minutes, I want to say, maybe a little longer than that, which should be good. And so I was starting to remove them, and as you can see in the footage, I wasn't watching the jelly, and this stuff can really get like, not explosive, but you'll see it boils up really fast. And if I didn't have that lid on this thing, I bet it would be literally everywhere. So you really got to watch this stuff, especially with the sugar, because it causes it to get like, the bubbles become more gelatinous, so then they're sort of they hold harder, or I don't know how to describe it, but they can bubble up and really foam up fast. So you really got to watch it, be careful. Luckily I caught it just in time because it was like spurting through that little hole in the lid, but yeah, make sure you guys pay attention. At this point I added that like calcium water mixed in really good because I was almost to the point where I'm going to start jarring this stuff up, and I did try and boil out more of the water content this time. I think the previous time, even without the pectin, it was a little too watery. You sort of want to like boil it down to be more of like a syrupy consistency, and I think that's like what I missed the first time, plus obviously the pectin. So this one looks a little better to me. I probably could have boiled it down a little more, and you'll see in the final result, but overall it's looking pretty good. You can do like a little jelly test by putting some on a spoon and putting it in the freezer. In my case, I just rubbed an ice cube on the other underside of the spoon to accelerate the efforts, and you can see it seemed to gel up okay. I mean, it looked pretty good on the spoon, but later you'll see it's not perfect. So maybe this isn't the best test. Once you've hit your like 120 degrees for your boil point for this jelly, I think that's what you're supposed to hit. You can probably consult your recipe, by the way. Don't like take any of this as the exact way to do it. I would consult a few different recipes to get an idea, but then it's time to jar it up. I didn't realize I had a canning funnel this whole time. It was buried in like some other equipment, so I just used like a coffee pour over funnel. You can pretty much use anything, but yeah, you want to bring the fluids up to about 1/4 inch from the top, and that should be pretty much good. And then you're going to put some lids on there, screw them on tight, and then we'll move on to the next step. By the way, the actual lids should be boiling in like a small saucepan or something. Again, this all needs to be like really sterile, so you should pre-boil those lids. And this is also that way these seal, and then they can be stored on a shelf somewhere for like a year or two. So you got to make sure you pretty much boil everything, and that's what that little magnetic wand is for. It's retrieving them out of the boiling water. I don't know about you guys, but I'm like absolutely in love with the color of this jam. I think it's like so deep and so beautiful. So I hope you've been enjoying the color of it as well, because I think it's just awesome. But anyways, once you got everything jarred up, I guess we call it canning. I don't know what it's called. I think it's canning. But once everything's in their jars, we are still not done. At this point, they're all in there, but we need to boil the jars for 10 minutes. This sort of sanitizes everything and makes it sterile, so that way they'll seal. And this also like pressurizes the jar, so then later when they cool off, it's some weird like pressurization, depressurization, and it like sucks the seal down harder. And the jars, you'll hear like a and then you'll know that they sealed, and you'll be able to visually see that. So you'll leave them overnight wrapped in a towel, and you'll just hear them popping throughout the night, and that means they're sealing, and they're good to go for a year or two. So that's pretty much it. Alright, all that's left to do now is make some nice breakfast and use this beautiful jelly. So we're going to brew ourselves a really nice hot coffee, and we are going to get some toast started. Now here's the secret, folks. This is something my wife showed me. This mascarpone cheese, put this on first, then we put this beautiful jelly on it, and bon appetit. We got ourselves a beautiful breakfast. The taste is very exotic feeling, I guess you could say. It's really unique, and it's something I definitely recommend. I really enjoyed it, and I love the taste. Well, I know this isn't really houseplant content. I still hope you guys enjoyed that. I have done like mushroom foraging and other random like foraging things in the past, so I know some of you actually enjoy this stuff, and so hopefully it was cool and at least a interesting thing to learn. These are pretty common, and you still have a good chance, even now if you're viewing this video, I shouldn't say now, because you could be viewing this a year from now, but if it's like late September, early October, there's still a chance to find some grapes. So Definitely do your research, find out what they look like so you can properly identify them, and then give it a shot. This stuff is really awesome, it tastes really great, and it's worth the effort. I hope you guys enjoyed this content, and as always, may your plants go strong and healthy. I'll see you next time.